Ask Dan Schneider. Warren T. emails me and says, Dan, you keep on stating that Orson Welles had more to do with the film The Third Man by Carol Reed than he really did. Everyone knows that Welles wrote the scene in the Ferris wheel and a few other scenes, but he did not direct any scenes, and stopped trying to attribute things to Welles when Carol Reed was the man behind it. Well, that wasn't really a question, but it opens up the idea of what I've been talking about for the last decade or so, and that is that when I was growing up, I remember Orson Welles on a number of talk shows, on the radio, on local television, on national television, on the Johnny Carson show, Merv Griffin, other people, Dick Cavett, and he always basically claimed that he had directed some of the scenes. Sometimes he was a bit more secretive about it, or a bit, not as open about it. Other times he blatantly stated, yes, he did direct some. Now, people have said this is just Welles's egomania coming to the fore, and since I'm an egomaniac, according to many people, that I have latched onto this. Well, that's utter nonsense. The thing is, every artist has their own style. Every artist has their own ability that they can get to. Carol Reed never did a film even in a league with The Third Man's greatness before The Third Man nor after. And I've seen 3 or 4 of his pre Third Man films, including the one just before it, with whose name title that slips my mind, and that because it has a few canted angles, people say, well, see, he was going that way. And I've seen a handful of his later films, including, his most famous one after The Third Man, Agony and the Ecstasy, which is just a very rote biopic of Michelangelo. The man was utterly incapable of directing such a masterpiece. Now, one could say, well, George Stevens was also a studio director, and he directed Shane, but Shane is very much in Stevens's early work and later work. It's part of a continuum. It doesn't stand out the way that The Third Man does. Welles, however, it stands very well in his canon. I mean, it is so Wellesian a film. And I don't doubt that Carol Reed did direct the bulk of it. He probably directed 60 or 70% of it. But there's no doubt that certain scenes have that Wellesian touch. The film script as a whole has that Wellesian touch. If Welles did not exist, The Third Man would not have existed. And by that I mean not only his part, the role he played, but there would not have even been the idea of doing such a tale like that in such a way. Reed was so obviously doing a Wellesian film that when he got Welles there, I'm sure he was in awe of Welles, and Welles, did take over some of those scenes, certainly the ones he was in, and I'm sure that he looked at the script and had people like Cotton, who he'd worked with, probably recommended him and knew the Wellesian manner of working. Can I prove this? No. But it is interesting that no one really ever challenged Welles's claims while he was alive. When Welles died, we got people like on the DVD versions of the commentary saying, well, Welles was just, an egomaniac, and he was just bragging and trying to take credit. None of these people ever really spoke out against Welles during his lifetime, and I looked that fact up. Even Carol Reed never really spoke out against Welles in this manner. And I think that is something that is quite important to recognize. I think Carol Reed knew that the film would not have existed with Welles. I think Carol Reed knew that Welles had a great hand in the film. And let's face it, Welles had been blacklisted. His name couldn't appear on there. So I think that Fallen Idol, by the way, is the name of the film that came right before The Third Man. It just came to me. But I think it's so obviously an Orson Welles film. It has to be in Orson Welles' canon. You can include it in Carol Reed's canon because he's the official director of record, but it's an Orson Welles film through and through. And if you don't believe that, if you don't understand it, you do not understand art, you do not understand film, you do not understand the unique imprint that every artist puts on a work of art. Orson Welles is the reason The Third Man exists. No one else. You could have substituted any Hollywood director, any studio director for Carol Reed, and you would have had a film that's 98 to 99% similar. You remove Wells and the film doesn't exist. Period.